nervous system regulation helps us root back into us. And when we don't have that, we're jumping out. We're trying to get more. And so going back to that spiritual journey, we think that the answers are external. We're reaching externally for the next relationship or the money or this or that. And actually, all of the answers are within us. In a safe environment, we can recognize that, but we can't actually come back into ourselves and even see that if our nervous system isn't regulated.
Welcome to Soul Pod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. Welcome back, light beings. Crystal here, really excited for today's episode. We're going to dive into another story of awakening with a very powerful guest with all kinds of tools that will serve you on your journey. I'm joined today by Meera Dhawan, a trauma-informed yoga educator, pranayama teacher, and therapist in training whose work bridges Eastern wisdom and modern mental health. Raised between cultures and deeply influenced by her Indian roots, Meera blends practices like pranayama, meditation, and restorative yoga through a trauma-sensitive, human-centered lens. And her offerings help people connect with themselves, with nature, and the deeper rhythms of life. And we're so excited to share that her work will soon be featured in SoulPod, in our sleep portal, supporting those looking to downshift and soothe their nervous systems at the end of the day, which we all need. Welcome, Meera.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here.
So excited to have you here and be in this conversation today. I have a feeling that we're going to get into some really important concepts when it comes to your journey in the spiritual, mental, physical realms of healing. And so just to kick us off, I would love to go back in time a bit with you to the beginning of your journey. And what does your awakening or self-realization process look like? A lot of times I've noticed that there's usually an initiation point or something that cracks you open to what's possible on the spiritual journey. Did you have that experience? And of course, it's always and ever evolving.
You know, I wouldn't recognize myself as someone who is self-realized or awakened. And that comes with deep reverence to me because I have had the luckiness to study with some amazing, incredible teachers and learn about so many stages, Ramana Maharishi, and just the absolute groundbreaking breakdown that sometimes is associated with enlightenment or self-realization. And so for me, I'm kind of in that way a little lucky that I haven't had this like ground earth-shattering experience of just everything is disconnected. And I would say that I am gradually on that spiritual process of using my tools, of continuing practicing non-attachment, but I never had a moment or I never had kind of a progress towards that idea or a concept. So yeah, that's kind of where I just wanted to start with.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a point here, which I think is really important to highlight for those who are on the journey. And that's why I like the term awakening, because it's a verb and it's ever evolving. You're never really done. You're never really, at the precipice, even though there's multiple levels of that kind of evolution, depending on the spiritual framework that you're looking at. But I think for so many of us out there, we're on this journey of developing a relationship with presence, whether that starts through meditation or breath work and getting this deeper relationship with the self. So I'm curious, in all of your work and the amazing teachers that you've studied with, was there any particular modality at the beginning that really helped you connect with yourself more deeply and understand yourself more deeply?
Yeah, I think that one of the most groundbreaking thing for me has been silence. So I
Mm.
was lucky enough. I have had many, many teachers, but two of them that really stick out for me. My first Ayurveda teacher, Sachi Doctor, continued to help me explore who I am in ways that I don't think everyone ever gave me that space or that inspiration as well. Looking at her and just seeing the work that she was doing and that she was also an Indian woman, I think that questioning of the self was a really interesting thing that I was seeing modeled in someone. And then I'm lucky enough that I started studying under Prasad Rajnikar and I went to India and did a meditation training with him. And I think that the key thing that allowed me to deepen my practice in my life is silence. So not only were
Mm.
we learning these enriching concepts of yoga, but we had space and silence to process that. So from there, I did Vipassanas. I did a 10-day period of silence, and I think silence is so underrated. I think that in order for us to really understand what is going on in our mind, it needs to be silent around us. And so I think that is one of the modalities that have helped me the most.
I love that because I agree with you 100%. Silence and the simplicity of sitting with nothing is underrated and it is challenging. That silence is such a teacher. And similarly for me, that has been a whole different realm to get familiar with. And guided meditations and guidance in general really gives you the framework. But some of the deeper work comes from those experiences of sitting with life as it is
Hmm.
instead of creating anything around it, sitting with what is, which really is such a practice of surrender, it seems like, with silence.
Hmm.
And I really encourage anybody who's doing this work, if you're working with guided practices, to also work on those self guided practices and the silent practices. And I'm curious, I don't know if we've had anybody on the podcast yet that has studied Ayurveda. Would you want to kind of share what Ayurveda is and how it's connected to your spiritual journey?
Yeah, it's such a deep one.
Yeah.
It's a science from the Vedas. So
Mhm.
Ayur means the life or knowledge, and Vedas is the Indian texts that have all this depth and was put together for thousands of years. So we have these texts that were passed down for generations that have knowledge on the way that the world is, the nature, medicine. It was this growing, evolving brain knowledge document that had kept growing. And I think for me, it has been a connection to nature more than anything. Ayurveda has so much wisdom on the reality that it's not that, oh, that's nature and that's me. No, actually,
Mm.
I am in the nature. I am nature. And what happens with the leaves, what happens with the seasons impacts me and my body. And what I do in my own space impacts what is around me. So I think through Ayurveda, especially, I've now found myself when I look and I am in spaces, especially in nature, I think about how it's all connected and how that is a cycle that I'm getting from the nature and I'm also giving. And we all actually are a part of it together. That modality has really helped me to understand that.
So beautiful. I love that concept of it's just a truth that nature, we tend to talk of it as though it's outside the house. I'm like going to go out into nature and it's separate from us, but remembering that we are nature. There is no separation. And I can't remember which language this is, but I think in some languages, there is not a word for nature because it's not considered separate from you. I think that's so interesting. And with your study of Ayurveda, I'm curious how you think about healing when it comes to the spiritual journey. We've been talking about this on a few episodes of the podcast lately. It's such a powerful, deep topic, the topic of
Hmm.
healing. And I know the little bit that I do know about Ayurveda is that it's very tied to helping you heal. And the work that you do as well with the nervous system, and then we'll get into sleep in a little bit. But I'm curious, how has that shaped your relationship to healing, both for yourself and for people you work with?
Mm. Yeah, I was sitting with the question of healing and really thinking about what it is because I do feel like it's very, very culturally dependent as well. And I I think that healing, when I really think about it, and I've studied so many different modalities at this point, it's interesting to be like, what is the commonality? So I've studied mental health therapy. I see clients, I do trauma work with clients, and then I studied Ayurveda and yoga and the Panchakosha model and all of these different modalities. And what is the commonality between it? It's that it is creating space to take in what is helpful for us and then creating space to let go of what isn't. So when I think of healing from a trauma perspective, a traumatic event might happen, and suddenly we have these beliefs that we're not good enough, or our body tenses up, our nervous system tenses up. So when we look at healing across all the layers of self, it's so multifaceted because there's so many things that we've absorbed from whatever has happened. So how can we start to let that go? And it doesn't just look like I'm going to talk it out so it goes away. A lot of times I have to move the body or I have to work with my nervous system. And then how can I create space for something more nourishing to come in? Maybe a new belief that will serve us better in life, or a little bit more space in the chest to breathe. And I think that the reason I say it's culturally dependent is because healing is often a place of, when everything's okay, it's in your control. You can go and you can heal from these modalities. But a lot of times healing isn't necessarily in someone's control, right? The environment around them isn't allowing them to heal or giving them space for that. And in that case, I would say healing is more of a community support. It's more of a societal intervention. So even thinking about how healing, it doesn't work on an individual level. It's also multifaceted and it can keep growing, and everything impacts everything.
Love that. Everything impacts everything. I love that you mention the societal component because you're totally right. And I agree with that 100% that there has to be some space in order for you to be vulnerable enough to heal, to step into your wholeness, to face what isn't serving you, whether that's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and stepping into more and more of who it is that you really are. And I also love that it's so multifaceted healing. And I realized this when we got into it in another episode. We can talk about the mental component of healing, which I find so interesting to think about it in these different paradigms. And there's lots of different ways to think about it. But mentally, it's like the biology of ourselves and really understanding, like, how can I, from a mental perspective, the way I'm thinking and what I believe, and even my brain health and my brain waves and all of that, that's kind of in a mental paradigm. And you're working on that with your therapy and work with your clients. And then there's the emotional, and obviously the mental and emotional connect to each other. This is how you're feeling in your body, how you're feeling in your experience, being like this kind of echo of what it is that you believe. And then the spiritual component, the nonlinear component, and they all are intertwined. And I really like that you mentioned this because I don't know if anybody, I've heard it put quite that way, that, the cultural component. And you can imagine in today's time, there's certain societies and cultures where healing is a lot more accessible than others. And so it's not just an individual journey, it's a collective journey. And we're all part of that. So really, really beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
So going back to kind of along these lines, the nervous system, what's your relationship with the nervous system in your work, and why is it so important to develop a relationship with your nervous system on your spiritual journey?
Mm. I think the nervous system has just become so captured and so what is the word for it? Popular in our
Hmm.
modern day. Like everyone's like nervous system, nervous system, and it's an ancient concept. We had pranamaya kosha. When we look at yoga, the layer of prana, which is this life force that moves through us. In Chinese medicine, it's qi. And I do think, and I've talked to my teacher Prasad Rajnikar about this, nervous system regulation is just another way of saying there's this force that moves in us and there's this life energy, and we need to learn how to work with this really powerful thing. And so we have things like breath techniques that can help to regulate the nervous system, which I share pranayama on all my platforms because I think it's so important. But I didn't fully understand what nervous system regulation meant till
Mm.
I felt it. And now I notice, once you notice it, it's so different. When you notice that you're in your body and you're not in your body. And that distinction has changed my life. Just seeing, especially when I'm sitting with clients. I'm sitting with a client and my nervous system is not regulated. I'm not in my body. Why? And that gives me feedback. What's going on with them? Usually there's something energetically also happening to make them out of body. And suddenly we're in this space where both of us are out of our bodies. And now you can see that. And it gives you so much more information when you're not in an environment that makes you feel safe. Why? What is happening with the layers of your being? And how can you come back to your body? So I think the nervous system regulation is key because it gives us this place of understanding when we're not in ourselves and when we are in ourselves. And when we look at it from the values in Ayurveda as well, or in yoga, we talk about rooted. There's like an energy, a wind that is strengthened when we're rooted and we're grounded. It's called a panavayu. And it helps us just to stay onto this earth, like root down. Nervous system regulation helps us root back into us. And when we don't have that, we're jumping out. We're trying to get more. And so going back to that spiritual journey, we think that the answers are external. We're reaching externally for the next relationship or the money or this or that. And actually, all of the answers are within us. In a safe environment, we can recognize that, but we can't actually come back into ourselves and even see that if our nervous system isn't regulated.
It's our internal AI, if you will.
Yeah, I like that.
The answers are within you. And it just takes some practice to learn how to regulate the nervous system. And what I love about what you teach is developing this relationship with the nervous system, knowing when you're out of your body, which is such a powerful tool to have in your spiritual healing tool belt. And I was wondering if we can explain this maybe a little bit for people. What does it feel like when your nervous system is unregulated? It's some of the classics, like your heart rate can be going faster, but I think the more subtle, at least for me, indicators are that my mind isn't here. Like, and my mind is just running and running and running and running. And there's this feeling of a disconnection with the world around me because I'm kind of somewhere else, right? We've all been there. And so that's what we're talking about when we're saying, like, you're not here. Your nervous system isn't regulated because it's in some sort of fight or flight response on some level of that gradient where it's having to, the body, the mind is having to divert resources to your safety because something about you feels unsafe. I wonder, do you have any other kind of ways of
Oof, that's a good one.
pinpointing when you're not regulated?
Yeah. I think for me, it's more about knowing what it feels like to be regulated, which
Mm.
is why I said I didn't know that for most of my life. Like, I'm an immigrant, so I grew up in a different environment and I was constantly navigating code switching and things that would maybe make me feel out of body.
Mm.
So it actually took me a long time. I think I only recognized what it feels to be embodied within the last 4 years of my life.
Beautiful.
But I would say that, thank you. But I would say that it's like, for me, what it feels like is almost like the area right above the belly to the root of my seat is relaxed. And then
Mm.
everything kind of comes from that. And the other thing that can help me with this is that when we think of the nervous system regulation, we're thinking of the state of ventral vagal within the polyvagal theory. In yoga, we say sattva. And what it feels like is a environment where you're with your friends and you can just open up and share and you're not scared of being yourself. And that's been shown scientifically. So a lot of times I think we underestimate the impact of our environment, especially as spiritual seekers. I think
Mhm.
this individual focus doesn't allow us to recognize that we can actually use our environment as indicators for when our nervous system is regulated. So when you're with your close friends and you're just chatting and you're not worrying about what you're saying, your system is regulated. And check in what that feels like. What does that feel like to be with the closest person you know who you can say anything to? And what does your body feel like? What does your breath feel like? Use that. And now you know when you're around someone else, not that I'm saying anything about those people, but your body is going to feel differently, and use that. That's not regulated versus that is regulated. So I think that's the way I've been able to navigate that.
Just a quick moment to say SoulPod is a bootstrapped, female founded company built with a whole lot of love for people like you. And we just launched a new feature called Portals, bite sized journeys like the beginner's portal, the integration portal for when you're moving through big changes in your life and your spiritual development, and even soulscapes with a timer to soundtrack your solo time. You can find the link in your show notes. And if you're vibing with this episode, follow the pod so more light beings can find us. If you're thinking about, okay, what does it feel like to be regulated? Especially, I love that. Think about your relationships because that's such a great barometer. We all know what it feels like to be in the presence of somebody that really makes you feel seen, safe, heard, loved, connected, all of those things. And it's really learning on the spiritual journey how to cultivate that sense within and to bring that experience internally and to learn how to dial that up within yourself. And for me, I've noticed that when I do that, especially in meditation, there is this lightness of being. Sounds very like esoteric, but it's like the best way to describe it, like a lightness of being, a loving connection. Presence is another one. You're just very present with what your experience is. And I also notice, this is just coming up for me now, there's a lack of judgment also when I'm regulated. It's just like an acceptance. It's, say, openness. It's a softness. The defenses are down, So I think this conversation will be really helpful for a lot of people.
One of the things, and what you described, I agree with so many of those things. And it made me think about how within the yoga philosophy and even Ayurveda, everything is so individualized. And I love that idea as well, because I was one time describing my sattva state, my clarity, what it feels like to be regulated. And someone described theirs and it was totally different. And
Interesting.
yeah. And I think there is definitely commonalities. I'm sure like our nervous
Mhm.
systems respond similarly. But when we look at the state of sattva, I like to tell students at least it's what you feel like when you come out of your
Mm.
meditation practice. It is what you notice around you. And I say sometimes it feels like you've just wearing glasses, everything looks more clear. But that's for me. It might not be like that for you. And the answers I get vary so significantly. And I love that about Ayurveda. It's so personalized. And I think that's been key for me as a teacher as well, to recognize that the state of clarity differs in people quite vastly.
I love that. I think it's such an important point. Everybody's has a different constitution energetically, societally. So it makes sense that it would be very individual. And while there may be themes like you mentioned, there's a lot of variability. So what one person's experience is not necessarily going to be yours. So that's a great point. So moving into sleep, this is, it's one of the biggest areas that people look for support in because most of us know or have experienced what it's like to have a hard time with sleep and how impactful that can be on your life and your health and your relationships and your work. So, how do you think about sleep as a component of spiritual wellness? And it bleeds into so many other areas of life, but how do you think about sleep in that context?
Sleep is everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, everything. I feel whatever I've learned, every discipline, mental health, Western mental health, Ayurveda, yoga, we cannot even consider the reality of meditating when we are sleep deprived. My teacher Prasad has talked about how, as meditation facilitators, we are not just there for that time being. You're actually kind of looking at the lifestyle around it. What is this person eating? Are they sleeping? And when they come into your session, you're asking them questions like, did you sleep last night? Did you not sleep last night? And the practice is going to significantly differ based on that. So I think that sleep is this necessary nourishment. I always think of sleep as like plugging in the charger. Like we're almost hooked onto this portal of energy, a prana that's going to come into the body and it needs to be plugged in. And that's how we can do our spiritual practices and do it with the state of mind that we want to facilitate as well.
Mm, love that you mentioned portal. We've got that sleep portal coming for exactly these reasons. I've thought a lot about sleep because it seems to be this, at a very highly spiritual level, it seems to be this, it is an altered state of consciousness, right? We're moving from our beta brain waves down into slower brain waves, down into theta and delta. And we're physically moving into an altered state, and spiritually it seems like we're moving into an altered state. And we can talk about like the astral realm and dreams as a very potent source of information. I don't know about you, but I use dreams as a lot of times kind of an indicator of what's going on subconsciously and spiritually in a lot of ways. So it's, to your point, it's like plugging in the human so that we can move into this recharging liminal state where we're really in a different
Mhm.
paradigm during that time. And so it's such an opportunity to make that a part of your spiritual practice, not just the biohacking of like, yes, physically sleep being improved is going to help so many aspects of your life. But the spiritual component I find really compelling too, because you can do work, I think, in these altered states, in these realms, and lucid dreaming, all that good stuff. But I'm curious how you composed the sleep portal in SoulPod and what components of those practices you find to be really powerful for downshifting into this altered state of consciousness, which is sleep.
I firstly think the portal has been informed the most by my embodiment of these
Mm,
practices. I remember from like the age of like fifth grade, I would struggle with sleep. And at that point, we didn't really have like too many resources. So I would YouTube hypnosis for sleep. And
really?
I remember even like at that age, I was,
That's so
l-
young.
yeah, I was
Wow.
basically doing hypnosis for sleep, right? I would just like look at the comments, make sure like it's not gonna make me crazy. And I would do this guided hypnosis for sleep, and I didn't know anything about it. And I felt like at some point, I remember after I had done it for years and years, I was able to do it all myself. So I could just say, like, imagining your hand is getting heavier and heavier and heavier. And it's like I'm talking to myself, and it is. And I realized the repetition of this guidance towards getting heavier and more relaxed within that deep state of that subconscious mind is very powerful. And so, first of all, it is based on my experience. I think that's first
Mm,
and foremost. I think the other thing that has really, really helped me is restorative yoga. And
love it.
I love how I did my restorative yoga training with Alex Rossi, a really amazing teacher. But I noticed that when you're in a specific pose, so like when you're in balasana, child's pose, and also when people think of yoga, they think of like, okay, these poses can never be cozy, they can never be in bed. No, they're all meant to be, a lot of them are meant to be in bed. They can be modified for pillows and blankets. And so I would being on this like therapist journey, obviously I would have nights where I would wake up and think about my clients. It's just natural.
Mm,
Just the pure like suffering that happens in the world, it would keep me up. And I couldn't figure out how to go back to sleep. And I would do a yoga pose, and in minutes I would be out. And I was like, what is happening? So I started to look more at the energetic impacts of yoga poses. So we're talking about forward folds. We're talking about child's pose, or, uh, like a seated forward fold. And what the theory is that our nervous system is down regulating when we are in these forward folds. So that's one of the things that I put into this portal. A lot of like downward poses that are cozy, that have a pillow, that have a blanket. And there's even other restorative poses that are also part of that. So, yeah, so I'm talking a lot about this, but I'm excited about this portal
I'm
getting
so
launched.
excited. Yeah.
And it starts from a little bit more movement because in the 8 limbs of yoga, we always typically it doesn't always have to go in order, but we start from asana. We start from this practice of movement and we go into deeper states, breath, and then dhyana, dharana, all of these more meditative states. So the portal moves from more movement practices, so like a swaying meditation, to pranayama, so that you're connecting with your breath, you're regulating, and restorative yoga in that movement section. And then towards the end, it goes into yoga nidra and things that are more meditative practices. And so that's the way that I designed the portal.
So excited. And for those who may not be familiar with Yoga Nidra, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yoga nidra, and I can't like fully verify this, but it is the foundation and the beginning parts of a lot of hypnosis. So I
Mm.
do think that the evolution of hypnosis has pulled from yoga nidra quite a bit. And when we think there's different ways to do it, but yoga nidra is essentially directing what we say in the yoga tradition is prana, so that life energy. We say that awareness is prana. So when we
Mm.
direct awareness to our hand, we are directing energy and nourishment and healing to the hand. When we direct awareness to our heart, we're doing the same. And so in Yoga Nidra, we direct awareness to every part of the body. And in that way, you are inviting every part of your body to relax. And the power of the mind is phenomenal to be able to guide the body into that relaxed state. And so we use that in Yoga Nidra. So typically you're laying down and you're getting just invitations. Notice your foot, notice your ankle. I added some things like feel it get heavier and more relaxed because of my 5th grade hypnosis background. So just a little bit of stuff there to invite the body to let go of it even more. Yeah.
I love that. Wisdom starts at any age. That's so cool. Thank you for that. I'm feeling called to ask you about your ancestral wisdom that you've had access to given where you've come from. And you mentioned that your grandmother has been somebody that you were very connected with. What's something that you learned from her or your we've already talked quite a bit about a lot of the ancestral information. Is there anything else that you learned from your family or your grandmother that's really made an impact on your spiritual journey?
Yeah. I feel so many things, but I would say my culture has really taught me how to chill out. Like, don't get attached to your spiritual journey. I'm even when you ask me like about awakening, I'm like, I'm not awakened. I'm so casual about the attachment to things. And in
Mm.
India, we use the word, in Hindi, we use the word aram se. So everything aram se. So drink chai, aram se. Talk to your friends, aram se. It means with ease. It means like chill.
Oh,
Don't think
I
take
love
things
that.
so seriously. Yeah. And I think that's like what I learned because my grandmother, she would wake up and do hours of pranayama. She would do all of these techniques. She would do yoga. And I'd be like, Ma, you know so much yoga. Like, and she's like, no, it's not, it's just a part of who I am. Like, there's that like humbleness, but that it's not even about being humble. It's about just it's with ease. Like don't make things more of a thing to evolve in your brain than it needs to be. It just is what it is. So yeah, when I think of her, she was a tough cookie. Like she would do 2 hours of pranayama in the morning, but then she would have a glass of whiskey in the evening. So I just really think she had a lot of innate wisdom, and I think she actually spread it to my dad. I would say my dad is somebody who it always that answer, that awareness that it's actually not that big of a deal.
Mm.
And when it is, that acknowledgement that, yeah, that's a big deal. You should get that checked. But most of the times we tend to think things are worse than they actually are, and not gaslighting anyone. But that's kind of my experience with my culture and just that ease that comes with it. Yeah.
I'm obsessed with that. With ease, like that's such a it's like with the flow, releasing attachment. It's just a reminder to
Yeah.
release your attachments to
Yeah.
things that we naturally put mentally on so much of our life. That's
Hmm.
something
Yeah.
I'll definitely take from this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually it made me think of one last thing, which is my
Yeah.
teacher, Prasad Rajnikar. He's like in India. I think that this is another example of how it's so embedded in the culture and the religion as well. When he talks about spiritual like journey, he's like, don't get attached to your spiritual journey. He's like, there's 7 stages of samadhi. If you don't get it in this life, you'll get it in the other. Because in Hinduism, we believe in reincarnation. So even the idea of why get so attached to your spiritual journey in this life if it's good life is going to happen again. So just like thinking of it from a cultural perspective, that's why there's so much ease and chill. Yeah.
Yeah, the concept of reincarnation really does lend itself to that. It's like if you
Yeah.
figure it out this lifetime, figure out another time.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before, but a dear friend of mine, we're pretty close, and she, I think because of the work that, I do, and she told me, she was like, "You know what, Crystal, I don't think I'm meant to awaken in this lifetime. Like it's just not something
Not for
that's
me.
calling to me." And it was stressing her out to a point where she's like, "Wait,
Mm-hmm.
should I be doing this? Should I be doing that?" And I was so blown away. It was such a great teaching moment for me too, because I was like, that's beautiful. Like you have this awareness that it's not something you need to be attached to. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that is evolving regardless. So
Mm-hmm.
it's such a, again, with ease, even with
With
your
ease.
awakening journey. And so I could talk to you for so much longer, but a few lightning round questions for you that we ask all of our guests. And the first one is, what's one belief that you had that you no longer have?
Wow. Um,
It's yeah.
that's so interesting. Yeah, I think the one that comes to mind is that there's like an ideal state of being. I no
Mm,
longer think or believe that. I think that even when I think of enlightenment, it comes with so much suffering, and I don't know if I want to even go through that much suffering. So I don't believe that there's an ideal state of being. I think that the way that I am at any moment is the ideal state of being.
beautiful. And how do you define or characterize consciousness?
Consciousness to me is a very deep, 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 just times a million state of being where there is peace and emptiness, knowledge, impermanence, and just existence. It's just all it's almost like a void, but it's not scary. Like the
Oh, I
deep
love
state of
that. I
consciousness.
love
Yeah.
that. I've been thinking a lot about the void lately, so that's a great definition.
Yeah.
And what similar lines, but maybe different. What is source, God, or oneness to you?
Hmm. I think that the unity is recognizing that there's almost these ripples of what happens when we do any movement, reaction, thought, action. It creates these ripples in the world. It propagates, and those ripples impact the leaves. And it's from as small as our breath. Our breath creates ripples, and those ripples are going through everything. So the nature around it is creating those ripples. Right now I'm creating ripples. You're creating ripples, and all of our ripples are intertwining with each other.
Beautiful. And if it's 100 years in the future, what would you hope for humanity?
I hope that more of us have had a chance to realize that the answers a lot of times lie within. There's this concept in Sanskrit called purna. It's this state of wholeness. And the idea is that we're born whole and we search and spend our whole life searching externally just to forget that there's already this wholeness within us. I hope people have more of that awareness of that wholeness so that they can love themselves more because life is hard and full of suffering. And most of the times I just want to hug most of my therapy clients. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I can feel that. And how else can people connect with you, Mira, if they want to talk to you more, learn more about what you're doing? Where can they find you?
You can always email me. So mira@trudayoga.com. I'm pretty old school. I have Instagram. It's Meera V. So Meera V and then Dhawan. So Dhawan. But I'm very in and out of that. I would recommend email. I do host a certified pranayama training course every year and a lot of therapists, yoga teachers, healers have gained knowledge about the breath in a profound way through that. So I would recommend if you want to learn more with me or take my courses, that's one I would recommend signing up for.
Sounds so good and amazing. Thank you, Meera, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your energy with us today. This has been really fun. Check out Meera's portal for sleep and moving into the sacred rest that we all deserve. You can find that in SoulPod. And thank you again, Meera, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here.
Till next time, light beings.
Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and before you go, we'd love to offer you even more spiritual guidance and daily rituals. This week, we launched the biggest update since SoulPod first hit the App Store. To celebrate, we're offering you a free month of SoulPod with the code STEP INTO THE PORTAL. Your SoulPod home has been completely reimagined with even more ease, more rhythm, and more room to grow. Now you can revisit past journeys, save your favorite rituals, and build personalized playlists that move with your energy. And at the heart of it all, portals. Portals are guided mini journeys, flexible, soulful spaces designed to meet you right where you are. Beginners welcomes you into the heart of soulfulness, no experience needed. Soulscapes offers looping soundscapes for solo self-guided practice. And Integration holds you gently after transformation, offering grounding and expansion. Download the app or tap the link in our show notes to begin. We'll see you inside.